Most of my audience, I'm sure, knows the name Ehrgeiz from that awful PS1 fighting game that had those kooky kids from FF7 in it. But there was also a giant robot show by the same name, and guess what? For the most part, nobody remembers that one. This should surprise precisely none of you, since aside from some Bandai trailers and a VHS and Laserdisc release from Bandai Entertainment, it never got much fanfare in English-speaking countries. Much as I love mecha shows, I'm also very much against paint-by-numbers storytelling. Now, of course, what I mean by that is the sort of story where everything is predicated upon this is how a story is told, and therefore these things are in it, without much thought given to how those aspects play out. Why are there cyborgs and psychics, for example? Gundam had cyborgs, Gundam had psychics, so we will have those too. Humans get to be psychic in the future, or so the trope goes. Not that there's anything wrong with it, I think it opens up room for spiritualism and other fun things to explore in sci-fi stories, which are typically non-magical. But at the same time, it gives this undercurrent and Ehrgeiz of just being part of rote storytelling, which gives me the frumps. See? Look at it. So humanity is beginning its migration into space, and of course this causes problems, because wouldn't you know it, the people that are no longer being directly ruled by the folks on Earth want to be independent. I mean, when has that ever happened in human history? Purple and green robots clash on Earth, one side being distinctly better than the others, I suppose. It's hard to tell who the good guys and bad guys are, because it's never explicitly spelled out in this first episode, but one of the pilots, Galbraith, escapes to the psychic kid, Hal, to lament their weakness in the face of the opposing forces. So I suppose they're the underdogs and we should try and root for them? I don't know. Smash cut to space where Jay Stryker, nominally our hero, I guess, gets in his own MV, or metal vehicle, and goes to heist some stuff from somebody because he's a scrapper and needs to eat. The last minute or so of explanations comprise the whole first episode, and boy am I glad for autoplay because I would not have taken the pains to continue without it. Well, all this is happening, Captain Aoi of the Next Forces, who are the colonies in this case, sets a trap for the SAC, who they are hunting for. Her super big brain cyborg guy, Mr. Arnold, thinks this is a bad idea, but her superiors think it's just fucking grand. Somewhere between the end of the last episode and Captain Aoi being about as sharp as a basketball, Stryker and his crew took out their target and came back, then started repairing their mechs. Will somebody tell me what the hell happened on that mission? I want to know, that sounded cool. Apparently Studio Dean disagrees. So we get to watch Stryker wrestle two children and a big green robot. The scrawnier, lankier mecha are, I suppose, supposed to be the space types, but the squatter, shorter ones seem to work in space just fine too, so who knows. They spend a half an episode dicking around and causing property damage in a ruined colony. Now, maybe I just have a conservationist attitude, but shouldn't a society advanced enough to make space colonies have the know-how to make the absolute best of everything? Wouldn't having a wrecked colony just sitting there taking up space and energy be a horrible use of resources? But I suppose warfare is inherently wasteful, so it's par for the course that they haven't figured out how to fix this either. But at least the characters, which at this point I've just pinned as low-rent Gundam team from Double Zeta, are making use of what they have available, upcycling old ordnance and lamenting how wasteful warfare is. Back at Bullshit Battle Plans HQ, Aoi has found that the SAC, which I will continue to not call the SAC out of professional courtesy, has outsmarted her lame-ass plan already. The Stryker team rolls up on their next vessel to do a raid, gets in a scrap, and it turns out that those upcycled shells jam and explode when you try to fire them. Mercifully, this doesn't kill Balzac, the veteran pilot, but not for lack of trying. Everyone makes it home alive, and I'm just feeling very confused about where this plot is heading. All told, for a show whose name translates to ambition, this seems to be ambling along at a snail's pace. It takes round about 8 minutes for anything interesting to happen in episode 3, and even then, it's just the Terror Rebellion forces sucking and failing to do anything against an ambush by the next military. For a group with a psychic for a leader, they sure are lousy at this whole tactics thing. Watching these low-rent scope dogs fight it out is just tedious. This is followed up by a full artillery barrage on Terra's home base, and let me tell you, I'm about as invested in it as I am interested in launching myself off a balcony. Hell, falling off a balcony might be more interesting. Meanwhile, obligatory child Anne is running around like she's high as a kite while this battle is happening. Turns out she's got next disease, which manifests like the mysterious Japanese cold that incapacitates a character entirely and requires medication, so that plotline has to be addressed. I was kind of hoping that this was going to lead into the idea that she's psychic too, but apparently that's not the case. Realizing that the plot has to move forward, the Terra forces try to escape and fly off into space to try and connect some dangling plot threads. But not before the jerk of the team proves he's not a complete jerk and saves Anne from her sickness. At this point, I'm asking myself, what is actually happening in this show? The answer is nothing important. Anne steals an MV and flies off into a restricted area, which only reinforces my idea that anime characters under the age of 14 should be locked in closets so they don't waste episodes on this bullshit. She ends up joyriding to the moon where the Terra forces are located, so finally something might actually happen. They fight and run away, and then come back to bump into the Terran forces next episode, where Terra tries to get our impetuous scrappers on their side. Turns out the guys fighting the war tend to kill their enemies, and our team of veteran scrappers ain't about that life no more. Quelle surprise. Turns out that this sack is slipped through Aoi's fingers again, and now her job is on the line. Shockingly, the brass wants results, even if those results have fuck all to do with the reality of the situation. At this point, I have to make note that this show veers between pretty and ugly at the drop of a hat. The characters are usually the ones who look like they're off kilter, but the mecha are all 100% on model, which is good because they don't really move all that much. I guess we know where all the budget went, kids? Aoi's subordinates try and convince Jay Striker's team to go and raid his ship. Apparently they're pretty good at that. But they're also really good at finding out when people are trying to do them dirty and end up beating the shit out of this undercover subordinate, with good reason. Aoi shows up in person to get her boy back, and there might be some sort of dramatic tension here if we had any reason to care about these characters. They operate in this bizarrely empty universe, and no one really seems to have a handle on what's going on. In the real world, that tends to mean that the writers don't know what's happening either. All of this is interrupted by the SAC firing lasers like it's Yosemite Sam on a bender, which takes out most of the Terran forces in one swoop. There's some heroic sacrifices here and there, and it's clear that Hal, the psychic who's been calling to the SAC, is on the verge of losing his damn-ass mind. I will applaud this switcheroo here, where it looked like the next military was more the antagonist up to this point. Not that they're so much better now, but knowing that they're up against something that powerful makes it easier to understand what the whole deal is. It also has the knock-on effect of helping to humanize Aoi a bit, because up until now she was just scary military chick. But overall the show is doing very little to endear itself to me, even while I'm trying to knock out a play-by-play. I'm frankly amazed that 8 episodes of a show can feel like such an eternity. The Striker team is still uninterested in helping either side, though they're generally more hostile towards the next forces, more than they are the Terra. In the meantime, Next 7, the ruined colony the Strikers are living in, gets heavily damaged by the SAC, and just about kills both the kids that pilot that green mecha. The MVs the Strikers use are shot to 7 shades of shit, so they can't go and find supplies to help Ken, who's nearly dead. Hal's gone off his nut. Aoi is back to the drawing board to capture the SAC, and everyone's at a point of put up or shut up. The Striker team ends up splitting off, 2 to each side with Striker left in the middle with the dead kids. We're running out of episodes, so I guess the other shoe is about to drop. God, I hope so, because I'm watching this show at like 6 times speed, and I'm still bored to tears. Granted, watching this show with Jawa voices does bring me some modicum of amusement. It's revealed that the SAC is the system with absolute consciousness, or, in layman's terms, an artificial intelligence. It's incomplete, which is why when they loaded it into the next-gen machine, with the particle cannons and all that stuff in it, it went AWOL. The intent was to use it to make unmanned and remote control MVs to fight their wars, and boy oh boy do I have news for you on that subject. Granted, this was scant years before drones became ubiquitous in the US military, but they were not unknown. But hey, in keeping with its low-rent Gundam status, Ehrgeiz touches upon a point that Gundam made in 1990 about how fucked up using drones on humans is, but doesn't go much further than that. In brighter news, Aoi has a new plan. Lure the SAC in and shoot the living hell out of it. Wasn't that the last 7 plans too? Everyone is still split up, but plot threads are converging now as the final episode starts. Hal's gone full nut bar, but no one really seems to mind. He's basically controlling the SAC now, and everyone is going to have a great big scrap to finish off the series. As Jay rides into the rescue, everything goes straight to shit. The SAC transforms into this Evangelion knockoff and takes command of all the Alliance's MVs remotely. Y'all should have put a bullet in that psychic kid's head like 3 episodes ago, guys. That boy ain't right. But aside from any of that, the strikers are free from the SAC's control because they've got weird patched together MVs. Arnold goes all death or glory, and since the show doesn't finish right there, I'll let you put together what happened. The only ones left that can fight are the strikers, and fight they do in a completely toothless fight that has neither tactic nor ass pulls. They just shoot it a lot, and it goes kaboom, and no one is sure who might have survived. Well, it turns out everyone did. There's no epilogue, no great point made about the nature of anything, nothing except, yay, we all lived! And I don't know what I was expecting from this utterly toothless show. There's no impact, there's no interest, really. Nothing to really keep you going, other than the fact that you probably had to search this thing out or found it on Laserdisc and said, whatever. The mecha action is nice, I will say. The animation does stabilize after the first couple episodes, but there's just not a whole ton worth talking about here, aside from this blisteringly brief synopsis. You've seen these characters before in other places, done better. It's a bargain basement version of Gundam, or a low-rent Zone of the Enders. Weirdly enough, I think Zone of the Enders did the whole sentient mecha thing better, and Outlaw Star got the whole ragtag group of freebooters thing a lot better. This is just sort of a gray mishmash. They had about 6 episodes worth of content and made it into 12, and even then they were straining. It's weird though, there are a lot of things that are just kind of taken for granted. They're cyborgs, mostly machine, very little human, but there's only the one, I suppose. No one has robot parts or anything, or at least they haven't said anything about it. They've been experimenting with AIs, but there was only the one made. The psychic thing, kind of the same boat. There's a lot more to unpack in this universe that they just opted not to, and gave a storybook ending where everything is A-okay. Except for all the dead people. If you can find Ehrgeiz on Laserdisc or a subtitled VHS, then by all means, you can probably get it for a steal. And it's a cool thing to point to and say, hey, look at this. But actually going through it for more than a cursory glance will probably be less satisfying than you may hope. All the same, it's innocuous, it's mostly inoffensive, and you could waste time in worse ways. I know I do. That being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off. Everyone is still everything is still everybody in the club getting tipsy.